Hope you're well. Now I want to talk about something else that was on my mind for, I don't know, whatever reason, and that's consciousness being too broad and too narrow. So that's a joke on definitions, shortcomings of definitions. A definition can be too broad when it includes things it shouldn't include, and too narrow when it doesn't include things that it should include, or both at the same time. And I think a similar thing happens with consciousness. What do I mean by this? So, I heard at some point in my life that there are animals that can perceive a wider range of the color spectrum. So I take that to mean that there are colors that we are incapable of seeing. There are things in this world that exist that we cannot be conscious of. I would assume something similar happens, like with age, we lose the capacity to hear certain frequencies. When I was younger, I was able to hear higher pitched noises, if I'm not mistaken, and so on and so forth. But you get the point. But at the same time, I am conscious of things that aren't real. I can imagine a dog with wings. We can imagine dragons spitting fire. We can we can be conscious of things that existed in the past that no longer exist. We can conjure up all sorts of things, Santa Claus, video games, we can create an entire universe and be aware of it. We can dream. We can be in sort of alternative realities while we sleep and create a whole universe, and we can defy the laws of physics, and we can be aware of it. We can be conscious of things that could not happen in reality. I could imagine things falling up. I could imagine a universe in which light is the natural state of the universe, and the stars are not what create light, but what creates shadow. And so maybe effectively it would be like the same thing, like if we had a solar system like we have today, except the sun was responsible for casting a shadow. It's something like it's impossible, I think. I don't know, I'm not a physicist. I took physics in high school, I really liked it, but I stopped at projectiles, and I did rather poorly on my optics tests. I blame it on my genetics. I think I just wasn't meant to understand optics. But the point is that there are all these things, and there's even like three like objects, that we can imagine, that one flask where like the thing goes out and then it goes back in, and apparently like that exists in theory, but like we can't recreate. I don't know, but there are things, right, like that aren't real that we can be conscious of, and there are things that are real that we can't be conscious of. And I don't really know what to do with that. I want to be optimistic and think of it as a kind of proof that consciousness isn't bound by the same laws that material existence is bound. And that, I don't know, that it's possible evidence for something like an afterlife or something, but I have no idea that that's really the case. Like, just because I can imagine something that defies the laws of physics, does that really mean that my consciousness could exist outside of them? But it's something that I thought was interesting when I noticed it, and I wanted to go on a rant about it. But that rant is now over.